Hello, GoodHard story listeners. We're so glad you've tuned in for this special conversation with Megan Carnarius. I am so glad that, excuse me, golly, I am so glad that she is here today. Cannot wait to learn from this amazing woman. And yes, Megan, I would love actually for you to give yourself a little introduction, and then I can gush about you a bit.
Okay. Um, so I started out my education in Waldorf, special education teaching. I have a mildly handicapped younger sister, so I started caregiving really early in life, and I have some good news I'll talk about with her later. But she's doing really well, and I learned a lot from her, and I continue to learn things from her. And then I went to nursing school and I lived in Europe for a while and I worked in an alternative hospital working with cancer and I did all the hydrotherapy and massage therapy. And then I decided to come back to the States. So I moved to Boulder back in 1987 and I was able to open the first memory care skilled nursing space in Boulder County. And that was in 1989. So I've actually been in this field for a really long time, and I love working with people with dementia. I feel like they're very courageous and they really try as hard as they can. And there are a lot of things that we need to learn about ourselves when we work with them. And there's a way of opening up that kind of mindfulness and awareness of how do I change what I'm doing versus I can't really change them. They're in a process and I have to adjust what I'm doing instead of what they're doing. So I really love working with caregivers and I've always believed that we can do a better job with creating a better quality of life for people no matter what stage they're in. And so helping organizations figure that out and how do we help this stage, whatever it is, be maximized in the best way for this person? What do we need to do to help that? So that's absolutely a passion of mine.
I love that. Well, it is no surprise that you grew up having a sister with disabilities because I can say with certainty that the typical siblings of friends living with disabilities become the most phenomenal people that are so wired to give back, serve, just share love on people, have just tremendous empathy, compassion. Just, I could not say enough about the typical siblings, typical parents, children of our friends with disabilities, because I've seen firsthand, time and time again, how it just creates just a different level of human beings. So, of course, you are. Of course, you are. Of course, you are. And Megan, we are currently in a series on the GoodHard Story podcast called Invisible Wheelchairs, where I like to do a bit of a deep dive into how those of us who have wheelchairs on the outside of our bodies, and those of us, which is everyone who has wheelchairs on the inside of their bodies, are just not that different. That we're all dealing with different invisible stuff in our stories that maybe nobody would see, clearly identify, like a physical wheelchair, but that is reeling inside of us and is not okay, not easily dealt with, a constraint on our story. And of course, this conversation all about memory care, dementia, Alzheimer's really has my heart and clearly is of deep interest to our listeners. We cannot tell you the number of requests we've had to have a conversation around memory care, memory loss, because our listeners of the GoodHard Story podcast are desperate for how to really love on, dignify, care for their friends and family going through extremely difficult, usually near end of life memory loss, and how to really honor them appropriately in this season. And I'm just so grateful for your work and that you're here and that you're willing to give us yet another beautiful angle on an invisible wheelchair. Invisible wheelchairs in in each one of our stories. In the disability community, we like to say that if you are in fact able bodied, you are temporarily able bodied. That it's not like able bodied and the disabled, it's the temporarily able bodied. And we're all headed that direction. And I think in some ways, likely a similar sentiment could be spoken over people with memory loss. I don't know nearly as much as you would about that growing, fascinating field, but I imagine we are all on a spectrum when it comes to our ability to have distinct memories and just the mind, the aging mind.
Right.
I guess my question for you, Megan, as an Alzheimer's specialist, you have had a long professional history as a registered nurse, which I love so much, specifically in a memory care facility, as a memory care facility administrator. You're a boss lady. I love that. This work is clearly not for the faint of heart. And I know, as I've said, because you have shared about your disabled sister, you are, in fact, a very special human being. So I would love to know, how did you come to work in this field in the first place? Like, what pulled
I
your
think,
heartstrings?
yeah, so I think because I had the patience and I would try to listen to the person with memory loss who was having difficulty speaking or
Mm,
expressing themselves or was showing things through their behavior. And I feel like we all have an intuitive muscle, and what helps us practice that intuition. And sometimes when someone has a hard time communicating, you have to kind of reach in with yourself and read that or try to understand that. And I think I've always had a good temperament or ability to do that. So when I was in nursing situations, they ended up always putting me in the area with the most challenging folks.
huh.
So we're having problems with communication or memory, and I was able to kind of navigate that in a way that was, as I said earlier, I really admire people. I feel like they have had a full and productive life, and now they're at this place where they're starting to do life review in a really deep way. And they go back into long term memory. Their short term memory fails them, and
Mm,
their long term memory is what's available. And so they tend to move into those spaces and be, in a way, projecting that on what's going on. And so if we have empathy or compassion around what would that be like? I think you can soften your need to make them come back into reality. There's
mm,
an appropriateness in early stage where people have questions and they want to know what's going on, and we want to use reality. It's really important to do that. And we just need to relax about repeating questions because there's no place for that information to land. The part of the brain that gets affected where they lose short-term memory can't hold that information you're giving them.
mm,
So we just have to relax and answer the question again. But there's a handoff that goes on. There's a way in which people have been very competent in doing their life, and then they have to slowly sort of hand it off. And none of us want to do that. There's a little bit of a confrontation in early stages about, wait, this always worked for me. Why isn't it not working now? So there's sometimes frustration and emotion around that. And I think for some families, trying to convince their loved one that they have a memory loss problem at some point becomes a little bit futile, and they should just drop it and enjoy being with the person.
mm,
Um,
mm,
so I started seeing some of those things as I was working with people. And the other thing I want to say is care possibilities have improved so much over the last 30 years. And the understanding that people have now about Alzheimer's or memory loss is so much greater than it used to be. And we have beautiful settings. We have home care agencies that are doing education around memory loss so that the staff knows how to work with people. We have the Alzheimer's Association doing all this work to help families. So it just feels Like they used to say the victim with Alzheimer's, and now they say the person with Alzheimer's. There's just
Mm,
been this gradual shift about,
yes.
no, this is a person. So one of the little
Mm,
stories I want to say
love
is
that.
when my
Yeah, very important. Language matters. Yes, I
yeah,
definitely agree.
absolutely. And one of the stories I want to say, which has really helped me through my career, and I really appreciate it, was when my younger sister was born. She had a lot of physical things that she slowly overcame.
Hmm.
She had some things that, she still works with. But when I was 7, my mother sat down my older sister and my father and I and said, we all come together as a soul group. We're all meant to be together. And what's the purpose of that? Why are we together? And your younger sister has a whole spirit, but she's having a handicapping experience. And there's something, her soul, there's something she's trying to learn from this experience. And there's something that each of us can really focus on how to help her shine through or be able to work with whatever these disabilities are, to really show who she is as this whole spirit. The tragedy would be if we were focused on the disability so much and didn't experience her wholeness.
Mm,
If we can really hold the wholeness of her in sight. And, when I was young, I thought everyone had house meetings like this. I didn't realize this was an unusual way to think about it. But it's been so helpful to my career because every
mm,
time I'm interacting with someone in a way obscured by the challenge,
yeah, yeah.
that it's up to us to try to help them shine through.
That is so beautiful. Your mother must have been an absolutely amazing person. Wow, that is a beautiful insight. I am a tremendous believer in the reality that God put us in families together for a reason, that we so desperately need each other to get through this life. And whether it is a physical disability or emotional, mental, relational, so many different just things we're living with and through and pressing on together with each other. That witness is such a beautiful component of where my soul lands, where I see God moving in my story is the story of community, of people coming with me and caring for me. So it's pretty tremendous that you have given your life to this. Your mother, I have no doubt, is very, very proud of you that you have done this. It's beautiful. Megan, I don't pretend you know much about my story, but I will fill in um, a little bit and just say I had a massive stroke out of absolutely nowhere, very nearly died, and subsequently became severely disabled afterwards. So I'm living a life I never could have imagined living, honestly. I use a wheelchair and, excuse me, do not drive a car. And I don't see well at all. And I actually see two images on the screen. There's you and there's you, because my eyes no longer track as one image. And I'm deaf in one ear. And as you can see, my face is paralyzed on one side. And I have one hand that doesn't work. And on and on and on. So a lot of physical disabilities. And it's taken a very long time to begin to adjust to an entirely new body that doesn't work the way it used to. And I guess, yeah, this is certainly not the life I ever anticipated living. But I found so many opportunities in this life and my experiences with disabilities. I wanted to ask you, what blessings and opportunities have you witnessed as you've walked alongside people living with memory loss?
One of the most amazing things is there's a phase in the middle of the disease where people tend to let go of comparing themselves to who they were,
Mm-hmm.
and they come much more into being present.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's an additional thing that can happen where people get a little bit disinhibited And the way that they protected themselves, they may have had a wounding in their life,
Mm.
and their ego construction can kind of hold that in and not really address it. Just be like, okay, this is how I'm living, and I'm living in this way, and whatever. But what happens is sometimes that gets disrupted. It gets sort of shattered by the person reviewing old memories and almost experiencing them as real and in the moment. And
Mm.
another thing that happens is sometimes it gives people an opportunity to heal something they would have never managed to heal with the regular way that they were handling their life. So the best example of that was a gentleman who was not a kind person. He was mean and he was very abusive to his family. And when each child turned 18, they fled and left the home. And when I met the couple, the father was in earlier stages still, but the wife needed him to come to adult daycare. So he came to our building for a couple of years and we never saw the kids. And then he moved in and he lived there for a couple of years. And there was a situation where his wife became ill and she passed, and there needed to be someone responsible for him.
Right.
And so we contacted the children and no one would come, no one would come. And finally the son came and he wouldn't visit him. He said, our father was so abusive, mentally, physically, emotionally, everything. I don't want to see him. What papers do I need to sign? And I said, I have to tell you that over the last couple of years, he has gotten incredibly loving and really effusive. And he's like, what? And I said, he goes up to people and holds their face and tells them how wonderful they are. He saves seats. He hugs people. He winks at people all the time. And he's like,
Mm.
I don't know what you're talking about. And so I had a dining room area that you could turn off the lights and the person could observe our area where activities happened. And so I said, why don't you just watch?
Yeah.
And so he goes and watches and he can't believe how his dad is acting. And after a couple times, he worked up the nerve to go out and see him. And it was like the return of the prodigal son. When the son came out, the father was so ecstatic and
Oh.
like hugged him and said, I love you,
Mm.
and said all these things. And you could feel physically the son was scared he was going to get hit, like there was something that was going to happen in that
Right.
moment. And then he started melting. And so he visited, and they were able to have a relationship that they never were able to have before
Mm.
that. And
Mm.
when his father was dying, he's playing guitar, he brought his own children, and when he came out of the room, he said, I cannot believe that dementia gave me a chance to love my father and for my father to love me. I cannot believe this experience has changed the whole way I view my life and the whole way I view my father. And it was because of dementia that this part of him could come back out again and be with us that we'd never known. He never told me he loved me the whole time I was growing up. And he's told me over and over and over again in this period of time that I've been with him. And it was just incredible. And so
Oh.
sometimes people are very afraid of dementia and think it's going to make them mean and awful. And
Right.
actually, there's some people that get really, really loving and they sort of shed some anxiety or shed some woundedness or
Yeah.
reconnect with that essence that's actually very
Oh
sweet.
my word, that's so glorious. I can't remember. Maybe I read it in your book. The expression fallout blessings, is that in your
Yeah,
work? Some okay,
yeah,
yeah.
that's my
That's
words.
where I read it. I absolutely love that thought that there can in fact be fallout blessings. That's so glorious. And that is this sweet son and father's story. Is this
Right,
the true gift of dementia, right? Or Alzheimer's or memory loss of any kind is a fallout blessing. And the stripping of the ego can be so incredibly powerful for relationship. Well, I think that's a beautiful gift in our, especially our camp community, which has numerous people with families where someone has a disability, and we gather and have a summer camp. And it's electrifying. And we've always tried to put words around why is it just so incredibly just charged, and people love it so much, and it's so special. And one of the ways we've identified what's going on there is a lack of ego there. And this lack of ego, because everybody's got physical disabilities on the outside, there's no hiding them. It creates kind of this no pretense, no
Right.
pretending, that is just glorious for just going deep and beautiful and real. And I imagine that's part of what is so beautiful about when there is memory loss for someone who maybe was mean once in their lives that's not anymore, that they are sort of casting off that ego, and it can be glorious for their friends and family. So I think that's really,
Right.
really
And
cool.
the other thing that's interesting is, sometimes a parent is too dominant and the child doesn't feel really authorized,
Mm.
doesn't feel really independent or capable in their own life. And
Mhm.
the one of the fallout blessings of dementia is sometimes it does take a long time. It isn't sudden, like someone dying in a car accident or something. It's
Mhm.
over a period of time. And sometimes in that, like a child can really take ownership of themselves and their life because now they're supporting and helping the parent in a different way.
Mhm.
And the parent can't hold on to the same dominance because there's things that are affecting them and their health. And so it kind of allows that baton to go to the next generation and that person to be able to make decisions.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, there's a lot of dynamics that go on in this that
And
aren't
it's
as
never,
obvious at
it's
first.
always complicated and
Yeah.
can be
Yeah.
quite beautiful. It's very difficult to navigate all. I mean, goodness, don't I know it from years of navigating just the healthcare system and all the family dynamics involved with a crisis, and oh, it's so much. But there could also be some beautiful fallout blessings. I love that. I know so many of our listeners are caring for aging parents or maybe in the early stages of memory loss diagnosis for themselves. I'd love for you to cast a hopeful vision for what's possible for a life with dementia or memory loss of some kind. In your opinion, what's your best case scenario for quality of life?
So I think those early years when people start losing words and start, having challenges, to help quality of life for that person would be connecting them to things they've always loved
Mm.
and making it possible for them to continue those interests in a way that works. So it, there was four men that golfed together, and one of them, the wife, had dementia. And so he had gone that whole journey, and then he started noticing this man in the group was having struggles. And he said to the guys, okay, he's not driving to the golf course anymore. We're going to get him. And we're going to walk the course until we need to use carts. But we're always going to have lunch and we're always going to have drinks. And
Yeah.
if we need to do 9 holes instead of 18, we will. And if we need to just putt, we will. And at the end, he was living in the facility I was working in, and each man would visit, and they'd always bring a golf club, and they would sit
Mm.
outside with him and just kind of mess around with the golf club. And this gentleman would always come in after visiting with his friends and say, that was a great 18 holes. And so the thing of
Oh, well,
how do you get the quintessential piece of that activity that they really love and are connected to? And I thought those guys did such a great job.
mm,
The next phase, you really get more into your emotions and your feelings. And so then it's really important to reminisce about the person's life and tell them stories back to them about their life and about the things they accomplished or the things they love to do, and sort of get into more of that emotional realm. So, how can I be with this person in a loving way? How can I forgive things that maybe made the relationship difficult? What can we talk about to soothe some of that if that's possible? And then the next stage, it's sensory experiences. It's sitting in the sun, in a window and being like a Cheshire cat, like enjoying the sun and enjoying flavors and smells and touch and the way things feel and sound, and really kind of getting still and being able to get into your sensory experiences with this person. So we have people that will go in the car with their loved one and go through a line and get an ice cream cone and go up to the top of the hill and look out on our mountains, and there's a dog park. And so they'll sit in the car and eat the ice cream and watch the dogs playing and see this beautiful view. And for the loved one, they're like, I feel really, I love doing this activity too. I love being able to just sit
Right.
with my loved one
Yeah.
and do that. And then towards the end, it's thinking about how can we make this, the person is still in their physical body,
Right.
but they're having a lot of difficulty communicating,
Mm.
and to not insist on that, to just be able to be with someone and be with them in a way that's tender and kind and gentle, and use that space to like do life review yourself and figure out the things that you want to, improve in your life. So I think being around people and seeing losses
Yes.
as they happen and
Mm.
realizing life is impermanent. And so one of the gifts also is, what is it that I should be attending to in my life? And what do I need to talk about or forgive or say to someone I love them? Because at some point I may not be able to. And so what is the thing that I can do about that to really be more present in my own life and aging, as well as I want to support people as they're going through that process?
Mm. Wow, that's so good for me to hear, Megan. I'm like, I need to make some phone calls and have conversations. I may have referenced, or you may have heard me say somewhere that my dear grandmother Amanda, who's now not with us, she is decidedly in heaven and among the angels. She was an angel, and she slowly declined, probably over about 6 to 7 years, with pretty advanced Alzheimer's by the end. And I was so moved near the end by her ability to be present. It was like nothing I'd ever experienced. I'd never seen someone so content to just be in the moment and not worry with things that absolutely did not matter. My grandmother was always one to never leave the house without her lipstick. And I mean, true consummate Southern belle type deal. And Amanda, in the final years of her life, would get confused and put lipstick on as eyeshadow, or she would do very strange things with her makeup on accident. And I would always think, this is just freedom. Like, she doesn't know. And it did feel undignified on the one hand. I definitely didn't like that. But mostly I was like, lady, do it. It doesn't matter anymore. And you're present, you're here, and you're in the world, and you do what you want, and you don't care, and it's glorious. And I don't know, there's something so beautiful about just the uninhibited brain, just going for it and living. I love it so much. This brings me to my next question for you that I find so key in so many situations with disability or intellectual disability or dementia, memory care, all the things is why do you think humor is so important, specifically in memory care? Because I'm a big fan of humor in all these situations.
Right. So humor levels the playing field.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
I there's humor is really retained very, very, very long into this process. So people are still responding or reacting to things, or actually trying to also try to do a joke or say something. One of my favorite stories was a woman that was I had worked with for a long time, and she was eating soup that had cabbage in it, and there was a piece that kind of got caught, and she was a little flummoxed at first. She was trying to figure out what to do with the cabbage, and then she realized she could wave it at the person sitting next to her. So she looked at the person and then intentionally waved it. And this person was very advanced. They were all needing help eating at this table. And she started laughing. And then she turned towards the next person and flipped the cabbage, flipped the cat. Every single person, even though they were very advanced with this disease, started laughing. And then at the end, she flipped the cabbage in her mouth with a bit of bravado. And then the whole table erupted. And
Oh,
there's no one sick, no one old, no one new, no one young, no one, like everybody's the same in that moment. We're just
yes.
responding to that humor. And yeah, it's important. And
Oh, it's glorious. Oh, I
it's
love this
such a,
story so much. My
yeah,
word.
it's such a healing energy. It just washes through you and sort of lets things go, lets things be, lets things relax, because there's so much worry and concern
Oh, yes. Stress,
caring for,
anxiety. Yeah.
yeah, caring for people. And you
Mm,
just,
mm.
I used to say to my caregivers, if you flipped a pizza in the wrong way and you hit the ceiling and it stuck to the ceiling, we would all just laugh and scrape it off the ceiling and try to figure it out. But if you do something with a person that later you reflect on and you're like, wow, I wasn't good at that, or I didn't know what I was doing, or I learned more and realized, most caregivers have a really hard time forgiving themselves for
Mm.
things that they didn't understand fully, or they didn't know, they didn't realize. And I just say, the humor thing is really important because it balances some of that energy and
Mm-hmm.
lightens the sense of duty, pressure, responsibility.
Right. There is so
And
much pressure involved with being a caregiver. You feel such
yes,
responsibility and can be so anxiety producing. And I like to say, when working with our friends with disabilities of all kinds, that and I'm talking about like caregiving, volunteer caregivers many times, of stop worrying you're going to do the wrong thing or say the wrong thing, because honestly it doesn't matter. What really matters is how you make someone feel. That
right,
thankfully they're going to forget what you say, but they're never going to forget how you made them feel. And it sounds like that is consistent here. Is our friends with
right.
memory loss will remember how they feel about their experience with you, sweet caregiver. You may not do a 10 out of 10 at caregiving perfectly, but that really doesn't matter. Just not the biggest thing. I'd love to hear from you, Megan. What is your number one piece of advice for all the caregivers out there?
I think any way that you can get more understanding or education about what's going on with your loved one
Mm-hmm.
is really important because it helps you stay objective. Like, this disease is working on them and it's not personal. And they're trying to manage as best as they can, but there are good days and bad days, just like there are good days and bad days for us. And so this thing of how can we gentle, the process in our heart so that we can be available in a certain way. And I also think grieving is really important to get addressed, that grief is real and grief is important to address. And
Mm,
if you need help to kind of channel that, offload it, process it, it really clears space to then be able to be with the person in the present and work with them in a better way. But if you're full of grief about what's happening, it sort of displaces that. It makes it a lot harder. And I believe that the caregiver is just as important as the person needing care. And so how do you maintain a little bit of a level of, whoops, what about me in this? How am I managing this? What am I doing? So that you don't deplete yourself completely. Caregivers want to give everything, and it's really important to be able to say,
right.
okay, I'm responding to this situation. I'm turning the burner on. I'm giving my energy, but I'm not turning it on 100% at every single situation. I've got to learn how to meter it a little
Mm-hmm.
bit.
Yeah.
The Alzheimer's Association's symbol used to be the byline, someone to stand by you. And it was because caregivers were dying caring for their loved one.
Mm,
Like elderly couples, the person who was well actually died because they were just like, we need to do something different about that
right.
and make sure that we're remembering everyone's as important. So I guess those are my key things that I would
I
say.
think that is so key in all situations in caregiving, is to appropriately grieve what is happening. There is loss and sadness in any change of a relationship is undergoing. And so many
Right.
times the caregiver in disability context feels like they can't grieve in front of their loved one, and they can't ever really be sad because of what the loved one is going through. But I am a big believer that if we do not truly grieve our losses and what is happening, truly lament them, we can't ever move forward in our lives and in relationship with that person because we are stuck
Right.
and we're not feeling our feelings. We aren't. I like to say, I wrote in Treasure in the Dark that you must grieve the losses before you can ever move forward. The first step in accepting the reality is to let the reality break your own heart. But then
Right.
once you've let that happen, you can move forward. You won't stay there, but you must start there. And I'm a huge proponent for that. So thank you for that word because it's so key for all of the caregivers in 10,000 reasons. Megan, I've spent years reckoning with the reality that I need care. I can't do a lot of my life on my own. But I think that realization is actually a universal realization. None of us, no matter how able our bodies are today, are fully independent. We need one another. You framed Alzheimer's as an opportunity to be cared for. Tell me about what we all have to learn about receiving care.
Yeah, there's a kind of vulnerability that I think we're scared of.
Hmm.
And we like the sense of autonomy and control and being able to direct everything. But sometimes there are things in life, as you said, that just change all of that really
Hmm.
dramatically.
Hmm.
And there's been people that I've met who I felt like they cared for large families. They took care of everybody when they were growing up. They lived in a situation where they were continuing to do a lot of care. And then they came up to this point, and I always talk about, like packing up shop, that as people are making a transition from being vividly in their life to then aging in a way that makes them have to experience this kind of dwindling, what are
Hmm.
the things that they hold on to? What are the things that get let go early? How does that progression go? That part of that is sometimes people come in to assist you and people come to help you. And I've met some elders where it felt like a relief to
Hmm.
finally not be doing every detail in their life
Hmm.
and to allow other people to support them and help them. And
Yes.
that there was actually a relaxation at a really deep level
Mm.
that they just could flow then with what was happening and what was going on.
Mm.
And then the thing of caregivers recognizing sort of integrity things about I have to show up even though I'm really tired. I still need to do the details of care for you. Even though you wouldn't remember that I didn't brush your teeth, I need to help you brush your teeth because I want you to keep your teeth.
Yeah.
And so these things of what is the caregiver called upon to do to keep showing up, and that thing of we need each other also in the way of teaching us compassion and empathy. And if we're around someone in a caring way, it's like our edges get sanded down and our
Yes.
ability to be of service can become a really polished and beautiful and wonderful thing. And it would never exist unless someone needs help. That's what
Right.
creates the ability in the caregiver to then share that goodness and be able to care, and for the person receiving it to be held in that supportive sacred space of this is what you're needing at this point in your life, so I want to show up in a way that really works for you. I think it was Rosalind Carter that had that great quote about there are only four kinds of people: someone who is going to be a caregiver, somebody who was a caregiver, somebody is a caregiver, or someone needs care.
Yeah,
And that
yeah.
we're all that way. So it's like, how can we be a little bit more gentle and gracious about,
Mm,
I may be in that position at some point and I may be doing that for someone. And what we're really working on is how to love each other in a
mm,
non-judgmental way, in an unconditional way. How can I love you even though these things are happening and I'm challenged in this way and you're challenged in this way? How can we overcome that together? And so, what a gift
oh,
that we can give each other
mm.
with that lens of, thank goodness you're here. I can learn how to do these things
Oh my
in the
goodness.
intimacy
Yes, yes,
of this
yes.
situation. Yeah,
Absolutely. I am a huge proponent of wrapping my mind around and thus freeing other people to do the same. That if we are on earth, if there is breath in our lungs, we are supposed to be here. And we may need tremendous care to do our days, and we may be called on to give tremendous care to someone, but we are all supposed to be here.
right.
And what a gift to be here today. What a gift. And we don't think that or say that enough, that, wow, we get to do this life, even if our minds, our bodies don't work the way they used to. That doesn't matter. Megan, in your book, you wrote that even with the overlay of Alzheimer's, I firmly believe the work of the soul is continuing. I agree. How can we bear witness to that work of the soul in our loved ones living with memory loss?
So I worked with many people over the years, and people would leave suddenly, like they would be mid process and they would die from something else.
Mm,
And then other people would stay and stay and stay and really progress into the last stage and be here for a long time.
yeah.
So I always felt like there was some bigger reason why someone would be here still or why they were leaving, and that we don't know that, and that's, between God and them. But
Yes.
it just feels like if someone's alive, and even if they're having the challenge of a very advanced dementia, there is a purpose, there is a reason they are still here.
Oh,
And that,
absolutely. I'm clapping. I'm clapping.
yeah,
Yes, absolutely.
yes,
Regardless of what the body is able to do, they're here for a reason. Yes.
right. And whether that reason is one of their children isn't ready for them to depart and they're willing to hang in longer so that person can get more adjusted and be ready. It might be that there's a caregiver that has, like, I've seen professional caregivers that have a lot of stress in their life and their life is challenging. And when they're around people who are so challenged, they start having a different perspective
Mm,
about their own life. Like, because we are valuing this person, even though they are so advanced, they sort of, it shines a mirror on them and they start recognizing that they have value
mm,
and that this elder in this situation is giving that reflection, and that person is able to change their life.
wow.
So again, a contribution from someone who's, sort of packing up shop, trying to
Yeah,
say I'm heading out, but I'm still going to
absolutely.
do these last things to help
They
other
are
people.
providing such valuable perspective. And this is a glorious mirror of, wait, what is important in my life? Yes, I mean, so many, the greatest tutors are so many times the people in our lives struggling through all kinds of hard realities. So yes, I'm a big believer in that.
And I've felt sometimes like somebody was an angel that hadn't transitioned yet. Like they had all the iridescence and sparkly love of someone that really could go, but they were still here. And it was like being around them, everybody would just be bathed in this light. And when they passed, everyone was, just missing that light in the world. And this person couldn't speak.
Mm,
They were very advanced. They needed a lot of care, but there was all this love they
yes.
were exuding all the time that we were bathed in. And
Mm,
so I know even with dementia, that
Yes.
people can share that beingness of that lovingness that can be part of this picture.
Absolutely. We are not merely what our bodies can do. Please, we are our
Hmm.
souls. And yeah, I'm so incredibly with you there. Okay, final questions. I was so struck by these words on your website. Old age is a summons to an alternative view. It is the domain of reflection, inner enrichment, and deepening spirituality. These qualities have the potential to revitalize our culture. It is our charge in later life to realize and transmit this gold. Well, okay, so coach, coach us here, Megan. What can we start sorry, how can we start seeing aging as a time of enrichment and deepening rather than only a time of tremendous decline?
Right, right. So I think in youth, you're trying to develop, you're trying to grow up, you're trying to learn skills, you want to be productive in the world. And then there's this arc where you're doing those things. And then you sort of get towards aging, and sometimes some of it falls off because of health issues or career changes or different things that go on in your life. And there are people who talk about aging as a way to not be as affected by all the day-to-day things in a certain way, and having space
Hmm.
to really, where do I want to put my energy? What am I really interested in? What are things that I haven't resolved? And so sometimes the busyness of younger years relaxes a little bit and there's a little bit more space. And I think the judgment or vanity about comparing yourself to your picture when you were 24, or your energy level when you were 60 versus 80, the thing of being able to let go of some of those external criterias. And I hear people say, I finally came into my own. I didn't really care what other people thought about me. I just was going to be. And I know it's sad, and I'll give this as a little example, like the transition of when I'm being looked at as a female body and person, and then suddenly I'm being looked at as an older person and people use the word ma'am.
Hmm.
And I'm just like, oh wow, I've got silver hair and I'm being called ma'am.
Right.
And I still feel internally much younger. So that's another reality. My dad was 98 and he made the comment to me, Megan, inside there's this aspect of you that's eternal, that's like your voice, your inner voice. And it feels to me like I'm about 38 to 42, but I know my body is attached to linear time. And I look in the mirror and I get shocked because a 98-year-old is looking back at me. But I think most of us, as we age, start recognizing there's an aspect of us that is constant, that is unchanging because of the outer package, that this physical package is aging,
Yeah.
but there isn't, there can be a less impact from that, and more inwardly what is going on inwardly for me. So I think
Hmm.
one of the things that staves off confusion or memory loss is
Hmm.
interests, having
Right.
interests, pursuing things that you're interested in, having your sensory realm working well. So having hearing aids if you need them, glasses if you need them. You want your brain to be getting as much impact and intake as it can.
Hmm.
And the thing of socially circulating. So even though introverts don't do that as much, they can still have very dear friends that they feel connected to. So one of the challenges with aging is sometimes your cohort is passing. And so, how are you
Yes.
connected with people at different ages and fellowships to try to have real connections to people at different ages and have that input? I think is really enriching. So,
Hmm.
there's
Of
some,
course.
hallmarks of like how can we age gracefully and successfully, but also this openness to it could be an inner adventure
Right.
of exploring things you never had the chance to do
Hmm.
because you were so busy in other ways in your life. And that now you can let go of some of the judgment of I'm not this way or I'm not that way, and just allow yourself to be who you are,
I love
and
that.
imbibe in that.
The words inner adventure. It's time for your inner adventure. It's glorious. I'm reminded of that beautiful passage of scripture from 2 Corinthians 4, that outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day after day. I love that thought, that somehow we are being renewed inwardly, even if outwardly we are falling apart. And I think that's our deep comfort on our inner adventure that we go on. Megan, will you tell people where to keep up with you and where to get your glorious book?
So the book, A Deeper Perspective on Alzheimer's and Other Dementias, is available at Barnes and Noble, on Amazon. I know some libraries have it actually, and yeah, so it's available. It's pretty easy to get, and
And it's on Audible right now.
yeah, it's on Audible. So thank you very
Read by
much.
you. It's beautiful, really. It's so cool when the author reads their own words. It's magical.
I had broken my leg when I recorded that, and I had to
Oh,
go down the steps on my butt to
oh
go down to a
no.
room downstairs, and a sound person made a little closet for me with moving blankets and the giant mic,
Oh
and I
my
had to put my
gosh.
leg out the little box, and it was amazing. It was fun to get it done, but it was really an interesting time when I
Wow.
was
Okay.
trying to
Well,
record
now
it.
when our listeners get that Audible book, they'll know and can picture you holed up in your basement with a broken leg. And truly, they need to hear a message you struggled to give. So
Yeah,
that
yeah.
will be a blessing for them. And this conversation has been a blessing to us all, Megan. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you for asking me. I really appreciated it and
Well,
enjoyed meeting you. Thank you.
I enjoy your insights and I enjoyed meeting you as well. Thank you so much. God bless you.